Let's discuss what a big man coach really does. More on Enes. The number one mathematical question I have about the NBA addressed, but not in the way I want. Some interesting notes about where the Jazz have improved. Did Utah really get itself in this situation in the first day of the NFL? It's all coming up on tip off. Boom, 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 boom. I must admit that when I was a talk show host, Mondays were golden. Boom, 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 boom. I mean, who can't do a talk show on a Monday? You've got the NFL, you've got Utah, you've got everything else going on. Boom, 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 boom. In fact, the fight every single day was always what's in, what's out, which is so much better than most of August, which is what possibly could be in. Boom, boom, boom. How's everybody doing? Oh, I have my tablet over here. That's what that is. Hope everyone's well. Let me hit a bunch of stuff. I'm going to try to go rapid fire here. I hope you all had a great weekend. It sure was gorgeous. I guess we got a little rain coming in, which is probably a good thing. And I'm ready for, my son said to me, Daddy, it's 10 more weeks till we ski. I was like, yes. So we're in our house. We're ready for it to snow. All right. More news on Enes, and I actually talked to Kiki Vandeweghe last week about how Enes is doing, and I'm hoping to continue that conversation with him coming up for you. So that look for that. But it was an interesting comment, and the biggest thing on Enes this summer is how much he's worked. I mean, that is the takeaway on everything that's going on this summer with Enes Kanter is just the amount he's worked. Now, is it going to increase his vertical? Probably not a great deal. I don't think he's ever going to be a big jumper. He offensively, he has got to learn a counter move to the up and under canter, and he has got to learn just how to score around the basket without getting up. I mean, I think he had a huge percentage of his shots blocked last year, which isn't surprising. And he's just got to learn how to be crafty. And as he gets stronger and handles some of that, he'll finish better at the basket. So that's where these things are really, really important. Much is being made about the big man coach, which frankly is about as relevant as having a team captain. And the only thing I just want to caution everyone, I mean, intuitively, I don't disagree that the idea that a big man coached by a big man seems to make sense. However, I'm just not sure that if that's accurate. And the only reason is because I can't find any history in the NBA that says that that's actually working. Uh, the Oklahoma City Thunder have Serge Ibaka, who's a young guy, and if I look at their coaching staff, Mark Bryant has spent some time on their TV staff, but unless I'm missing somebody on the Thunder's staff, I don't think they have a big man coach. The greatest development ever by a big man is probably Karl Malone, who was coached by Phil and Gordy and Jerry and Kenny Natt at one point in time was on that staff. And so if that's the case, then Mike Sanders is every bit the big man coach that Kenny Natt was. I mean, I'm trying to. Dwight Howard has developed as little as any big man, and for much of his career has spent time with Patrick Ewing, and I would argue he hasn't developed. And he had Mark Bryant before that, frankly. Mark Bryant, I do think, has moved from TV onto the staff of the Thunder a little bit. So he could classify as a big man coach. I'm just not sure. I agree that intuitively this makes sense. But let's make sure before we go too far into utterly believing this that we actually have proof that it's true, I guess is what I'm saying. Shaq in L.A. and Orlando. I'm going back. I can't, but maybe. So I think what I think is good with Kanter isn't so much that he's working with. It's just the variety of people he's working with. That he worked with Tim Grover in Chicago. That he's worked in Santa Barbara with P3, and now he's working with Vandeweghe. He's playing. I actually think in the case of Kanter, the more he plays, the more he gets out there, the more he gets his butt kicked in settings, the better it is. he has a belief issue at 19, 20 years old that he's got to take care of, where it's good for him to go up against Elton Brand, as seems to be the case in these camps, and try to hold his own a little bit and see how he does there. One piece of research that I have worked on and tried to work on, and I'm not good enough to figure out, and then just tried to follow without doing huge research, is whether or not a player really gets better based on his teammates. The conclusion that I have, without a great ability like some of the great guys in this, Dean Oliver, John Hollinger, or Kevin Pelton, or some of these guys, to be able to really document and show it to you, though I've worked an awful lot on it, is that players are who players are. They use an individual offensive possession the same, regardless of their teammates, unless they have one of the three or four guys on the roster in the league. So Stockton was probably one of those guys, and so we saw players play better in Utah than they did other places. LeBron right now changes the game so dramatically that his teammates, in fact, do get better looks. We better hope Chris Paul is not one of those guys, or else Randy Foye and Mo Williams might not be as good as we hope. But when I look around, for the most part, I usually see if a player switches teams, Al Jefferson from Minnesota to Utah, even playing with Darren, that he really came and turned out to be almost exactly the same player that he was in Minnesota when it gets down to the use of an individual possession. The teammates actually impact how somebody shoots, scores, uses their offensive game very little. Now, research has been done on how the Lakers changed when Magic Johnson took over for Sedell 3. That would certainly classify into the group of playing with a Jordan or playing with a LeBron or playing with a Magic, playing with a Stockton. How much that one player does impact things in a positive manner. So really all that research showed me was done well was that part of the hypothesis is true. And the real question is just when you go, but I just generally and I'm actually going to see Dennis Lindsay and I will talk to him about this. I, I just generally fundamentally don't believe that you can look at a player on this team, see his productivity, say, well, if we bring him to our team, his productivity will increase. I think that's a huge mistake, unless you have one of those three players. Utah football, what a tough weekend. I'm not one who wants to jump on and bang this and bang that. It doesn't do any good. I mean, I think last year they opened the year, they had an incredible tough schedule, and then they found a way to win. They found a way to win a bunch of games. That game in Pullman when I was doing TV for KJazz was just an incredible. They just found a way to win games, and they're going to have to do the same this year. And the schedule is now looking almost exactly the same, where starting well this year is going to be very difficult, and thus leadership is going to be very difficult. The key on last year was you had Tony and Bergstrom and those leaders who had been through success and had it. The only thing I would really question is how did you possibly end up in a situation again where John Hayes ends up being your quarterback? I got to know John a little bit last year. I think he's a wonderful dude. He is a gamer, a battler, a fighter. But he's not a Pac-12 quarterback. I mean, go look at the kid at UCLA. Holy smokes, is he good. And he's a redshirt freshman. And, some of the I don't want to I'm trying to avoid piling on here just because it's not my role anymore, but people knew the Jordan Wynn. I'll just tell you this. People knew when they went in to do surgery on Jordan Wynn's shoulder that his shoulder socket, at least from people who talked to me, almost has some deformities to it, and that there was just no way that he could physically make it through a season. There were specifics that they literally could stick fingers into his shoulder sockets. That it just, whatever reason, that's how he's built. And John Hayes is your backup, or Travis is carrying. I mean, It's a tough thing. What do you do? Bring in another JC guy, and then he goes for a year or two here, or at least he's your security blanket while Travis Wilson tries to get ready, and Chase Hansen goes on his mission. I mean, it's a tough call, but and so it's I understand why not. Um, but you can't go through another Pac-12 season with John Hayes as your quarterback. You dodged that bullet remarkably well last year, but when you enter every game with a deficiency at quarterback in this conference, it's tough. I mean, the only school that might have a quarterback that's equally poor is Stanford, and you don't play him. And it's not that John's poor. He's busted his butt. He looks better. He looked better. The minute he came in the game, he looked better. I mean, that's the other question is I can't imagine that Jordan Wynn was throwing the ball in practice this entire fall and spring and fall. The same, or he wasn't throwing in spring, so fall, the way he does in games, because if he was, how did he start? But anyway, it's too bad because this is going to be an uphill slog. For BYU, it's a big one this weekend. This will be fun. It's a travesty this game is not being continued. Utah's lining themselves up for a lot of cheap shots that when they lose on Saturday, then at least they're going to play Weber State and Southern Utah as their in-state rivals, so they make sure they can win. But it's semi-understandable what Utah's doing, or at least I understand where their point of view is coming from. I wish they would take it a different way. I just think that these in-state games are awfully important, and they could be played. But I get they don't want to have two home and aways. NFL weekend, quick few thoughts on it, and then I'll let you guys go in a shortened edition of this because there's a lot of other stuff to hear today. And the quick thought is obvious. Every statistical model said the 49ers could not get better. So much for that idea. I mean, they looked fabulous. Alex Smith was terrific. And he just looked like a different quarterback with more confidence, and the weapons are better, and he really, really was fabulous. And the Niners made a huge statement, and I still really like Atlanta. Atlanta was not playing a particularly good team in Kansas City, but I really like Atlanta in the NFC. I think Matt Ryan's going to take the next step. I think he's been unfairly criticized, but there's the teams that looked the best in the NFC in Week 1 had to be Dallas, San Francisco, and Atlanta. Now, whether that holds or not, we will see. But surprisingly, Green Bay. But the other one on Atlanta is how bad New Orleans looked. Great performance by RG3, but that's just a huge push for Atlanta. The fact that New Orleans may not be who they are, and so therefore those two kind of bloodbath games in that division aren't what they were thought to be. The other angle is that Green Bay just has seemingly not fixed their defense. You just kind of assumed that defense would be fixed, but Green Bay is very diligent with their cap usage and things of that sort, and so they just didn't add guys. In fact, let a few guys go, and let a few guys go on that offensive line. They haven't replaced Chav Clifton on the tackle position. They look like a team to me that just kind of beaten up by the salary cap, and they're just off some pieces. So we'll see. 1 week in, it's hard to tell. Boy, did Peyton Manning, that was cool. If you watched that last night, that was super cool to see Peyton Manning back out there in control, playing the game, orchestrating the game as he does. Big win for them against Pittsburgh. A Pittsburgh team, I don't think anyone's really certain about who they are. Ben Roethlisberger's running for his life, but that's kind of who he is. It's hard to tell where their line is. New England was probably the dominant team in the AFC, as everybody would have anticipated in week number 1. I'm not willing to go jump all over this Jets bandwagon, but the only thing I would say about the Jets, and I said this on Friday as we did a little bit of NFL stuff, is the negative stuff on the Jets had gotten way out of control and had almost gained a momentum that was beyond logic. So I do think the Jets are a 9-7 team. I don't think they're an 11-5 team or anything of that sort. Houston is a team that may be an 11-win team, but hard to tell when you play Miami. So we'll have to take some time on that. But big week in the NFL to get going. It was super fun to have it back, and we'll let this all roll for about 4 weeks, and then we got an NBA game 4 weeks from now. And the Jazz will have played their first preseason game already 1 month from today. The 20 questions to training camp will continue. Hopefully I'll have some good stuff, talking to a bunch of people, really digging in this next few weeks, so look forward to chatting with you. Thanks for taking time on tip-off.